There were over 80,000 people in that stadium. But in that moment, it felt like there were only two. Hailey Monroe, 38 years old. She used to be a cheerleader, the kind everyone stopped to watch. Now she's a PE teacher at a public school in Austin. Life moved too fast, and took with it dreams she never even had the chance to chase. But that night, something inside her woke up. Richard Caldwell, 50 years old, billionaire, owner of the Dallas Kings football team. A man used to winning, commanding, never showing weakness. But when he saw Hailey in the crowd, something inside him unraveled. He didn't know who she was, but he felt something. Deep. It was just a glance. 1 second. But you know when something shifts inside you, right? And in that moment, it did. Then came the kiss. Sudden. Out of nowhere. Stolen. She didn't think. She just did it. And he let it happen. The next day, the whole country was talking. They called her an opportunist. They said he was ridiculous. But no one, absolutely no one, had a clue what that kiss meant to them. This isn't just a story about scandal. It's about two worlds that were never meant to collide. About everything money can't buy. And how sometimes what seems like madness is just the heart trying to speak. It all started with a kiss in the wrong place, at the wrong time. But maybe, just maybe, with the right person. The entire stadium was shaking. It was the conference final. The Dallas Kings were down by 3 points with only 12 seconds left on the clock. The crowd screamed like their voices alone could push the team forward. And right there in the southern stands, Hailey Monroe held her phone tightly in both hands, recording as if it were her last chance to relive that moment. She knew that field like the back of her hand. She had danced there, cheered, fallen, gotten back up, so many times. But tonight was different. Tonight, she was just another face in the crowd, almost invisible. Her heart was pounding, and not just because of the game. It was like something was about to happen, but she didn't know what. She glanced around, fans jumping, stadium lights cutting through the Texas night sky. And for a second, she felt small, forgotten. Then she looked up. There, behind the glass of the skybox, was him, Richard Caldwell, billionaire, owner of the team. Silver hair, perfectly styled, sharp suit, serious face. But his eyes locked on her. Hailey's eyes widened. No way. She looked behind her, just to check if he was looking at someone else. But no, it was her. Their eyes held for 2, 3 long seconds. Heavy. Still. Like the noise around them had vanished. She swallowed hard. A chill ran up her spine. And she smiled. Not a big smile, but the kind that slips out when something inside you recognizes something in someone else. And then, like the universe snapped its fingers, the crowd erupted. Touchdown. Comeback. The Dallas Kings had won. But Hailey barely noticed. The game had changed. And not just on the scoreboard. The next morning, the hum of the washing machine echoed through the small, red brick house where Hailey lived, tucked in a quiet Austin neighborhood. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, blending with the muffled sound of the morning news playing on the TV in the living room. She tried to stick to her routine, coffee cup in hand, hair tied up in a messy bun, old college t-shirt. But her eyes wouldn't leave the phone screen. She kept replaying that video of the Dallas Kings' game-winning moment. But it wasn't about the touchdown. It was about the look. That look. Come on, Hailey. You're imagining things, she muttered to herself, shaking her head like she could talk the feeling away. But it wasn't just a passing thought. Something in her had shifted since that night. Something she hadn't felt in years. Like a part of her that had been asleep suddenly woke up. Hailey had never married, never had kids. There were flings, a few hopeful relationships that vanished over time. People always called her the fun one, the pretty cheerleader, the one with a future. But time passed, and she stayed behind. Even she didn't fully understand how. Being a teacher was what remained of her dreams, and she loved her students. But some days, when she locked up the gym after class, it felt like she was stuck in a loop of identical days and lonely nights. That morning, while trying to ignore the noise in her chest, A notification lit up her phone. VIP invitation. Dallas Kings anniversary game. Executive Skybox access. Hailey Monroe. She froze. Name was correct. So was the address. No explanation. No sender. Her heart jumped. Is this real? She whispered, staring at the message like it was some kind of secret code. She left the coffee on the counter, looked at her reflection in the window, and for the first time in a long time, she felt both scared and alive. Because maybe that night wasn't just a fluke. Maybe, just maybe, she hadn't been forgotten after all. Richard Caldwell always woke up early. Always. He was the kind of man who believed that if you got up before the sun, you could beat anything, even time. But that morning, even with the clock reading 6:15, he stayed in bed a little longer. The blank ceiling seemed more interesting than any million-dollar meeting. He had everything. At least that's what people said. Properties across Texas, shares in 3 sports leagues, a championship-winning team. He was respected, feared, admired, but not loved, not truly. And he knew it. Since the divorce 8 years ago, women came and went like social formalities. Beautiful, well-dressed, perfectly rehearsed smiles. But none of them. None had looked at him the way Hailey did. That woman in the stands. The one who wasn't supposed to be there. Richard replayed the moment in his mind like a highlight from the playoffs. The look, her surprise, the chill he felt even from that distance. It didn't make sense. But he wasn't really trying to make sense of things anymore. At breakfast, he ignored the reports. Sat on the veranda, looking out at the ranch in the distance, the horses grazing. He thought about his childhood in Midland, Sundays at church with his mom, the silence of his father. Back when money wasn't part of the equation, and maybe for that reason, emotions felt more real. Then his phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. VIP invite sent to Hailey Monroe. As requested. No branding. Discreet. He stared at the screen for a few seconds. Felt a wave of anxiety. That same kind he hid so well behind firm posture and a deep voice in every boardroom. Because the man everyone saw, the untouchable billionaire, was afraid. Afraid she wouldn't come. Afraid she would. Afraid of feeling it all over again. And maybe afraid of finally wanting something money couldn't buy. The event was for charity, but the vibe was pure spectacle. In the main hall of the King's Arena, socialites, investors, and celebrities floated through champagne bubbles and rehearsed smiles. Everything polished, everything perfectly staged, as it always was at Richard Caldwell's events. Hailey felt completely out of place. The black dress she borrowed from her neighbor was too tight at the top, too loose in the back. She drifted through the crowd like someone walking through a strange dream, not really sure why she was even there. So far, no one had questioned her. The digital badge worked. Security treated her like someone important, and that, somehow, was the weirdest part. No one asked. She took the elevator to the executive skybox. First time seeing it from the inside. Pure luxury, but understated. Soft gray carpet, leather couches, floor-to-ceiling glass with a perfect view of the field. A waiter offered her champagne. She declined. Her hands were sweating. And then she saw him. Richard stood by the glass wall, looking down at the empty field. Alone. Distant. A man who had the whole world at his feet. And yet, so visibly alone. She didn't know what got into her. Maybe it was the wine she'd had before leaving the house. Maybe the dress. Maybe it was the way this night made her feel alive again. But whatever it was, she walked toward him. Didn't say a word. Just stood beside him. He turned his head, slowly. When he saw her, he didn't look surprised. Just looked. With those same eyes that tore down all her defenses. Her heart raced. "Sorry," she said, though she didn't know what for. And then it happened. Hailey leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't logical. It was pure instinct. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. For a second, he didn't move. Then, he kissed her back. Outside, a photographer from the event snapped the shot at just the right moment. The flash bounced off the glass, but neither of them noticed. In that instant, nothing else existed, just that kiss. And deep down, they both knew. This wasn't just a slip. It was the beginning of something neither of them was ready to face. The next morning, the world didn't just wake up. It exploded. The image of the kiss was everywhere. Front pages, news websites, Instagram reels, TikToks looping endlessly. The unknown woman who kissed the billionaire. Who is Hailey Monroe? Scandal in the VIP skybox. Hailey sat on her couch in pajamas, face buried in her hands. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Former co-workers, old cheer squad teammates, distant relatives, all suddenly crashing back into her life. But it wasn't kindness, it was judgment. Online, the attacks were brutal. They called her a gold digger, unstable, pathetic. Trolls dug through her past, mocked her for being just a teacher. Words like desperate, embarrassing, fame-hungry were everywhere. Hailey didn't cry. Not yet. But inside, the ground was starting to crumble. The shame came in waves. So did the fear. And him? Not a word. No message. No call. She felt used. Like a passing thrill in the life of a man who never had anything to lose. She was the one being dragged through the mud. She was the one bleeding in public. But then, late at night, her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. You were the only real moment in my week. Can we talk? She read it again and again, unsure if she should laugh or scream. Her heart felt torn between anger and the ache to believe it was still real. He sent a location, a ranch, 2 hours from Austin. She froze, just stood there, staring at the screen like waiting for some kind of divine permission. Then she walked to her bedroom, opened a drawer filled with clothes she hadn't touched in years, and pulled out a simple blue dress. She didn't know what she'd find, but she knew she had to go. Even if it was just to hear the truth from his lips, or to finally speak hers. Because even broken, even humiliated, Hailey still felt. And some part of her still wanted to feel. The ranch was massive, quiet, surrounded by golden fields that stretched endlessly under the Texas sunset. When Hailey arrived, Richard was already waiting on the porch. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, no watch, no phone, just him. She sat in the car for a few seconds, hands on the wheel, breathing deep. She could still turn around, pretend none of this had happened. But some part of her knew, if she didn't walk through that door now, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. He didn't say a word when she stepped out, just opened the front door and waited. Inside, the house was calm. Dark wood, the scent of leather, old black and white photos on the walls. A place that screamed silence, and truths no one dared to say out loud. "You okay?" he finally asked. She laughed, bitter. After being called every name in the book online, never better. Silence. "I didn't plan that kiss," she said, meeting his eyes. "But I don't regret it." He took a deep breath. "Neither do I." The days that followed were strange and intense. She stayed at the ranch for 3 days. They walked the property together, had lunch in the backyard, talked about things they'd never shared with anyone. No cameras, no calls, no pretending. Here, he was just Richard, and she was just Hailey. But the world outside wasn't standing still. The team's board was pressuring Richard to speak out. Sponsors threatened to pull contracts. The scandal wasn't fading. It was growing, and the image of the serious businessman was starting to crack. Hailey felt it. She knew that for him, love never came without calculation, and that maybe in the end, she was just another risk to manage. One morning, she found him on the porch with his laptop open. She saw the emails, the crisis strategy reports, the scheduled meetings with PR firms. She didn't say anything, just looked at him with a mix of pain and pride. "Are you still trying to save your reputation? Or just trying not to burn with me?" He didn't answer. And in that silence, Hailey understood. Their worlds didn't fit in the same space. At least, not yet. The video leaked on a Tuesday. It wasn't just a photo or a rumor. It was a full video, taken somewhere inside the ranch. Maybe by a worker, maybe a drone. Hailey and Richard, walking hand in hand, laughing, sitting in the grass like any ordinary couple. But they weren't just any couple, and the world wasn't going to treat them like one. Within an hour, the headlines exploded. Dallas Kings owner caught in secret affair with former cheerleader. Romantic scandal or PR stunt? Investors questioned Caldwell's emotional stability. It was a bloodbath, not just in the media, in the markets. An $80 million sponsorship deal was canceled. A longtime corporate partner issued a public statement of disapproval. Team stock dropped 12% in 2 days. Hailey lost her job. The school cited institutional reputation in their official notice. Colleagues who once hugged her now looked away in the grocery store. The world was in a hurry to forget she was human. Richard tried to hold it all together. He offered money, legal support, a private team. But that wasn't what she wanted. It never was. "You want to fix this with a contract?" she asked, eyes filling with tears. He tried to explain that this is how the business world worked, that there were protocols, strategies, that he had to protect the franchise. But all she saw was fear. Fear of standing up. Fear of claiming what he felt. "If you love me, then choose me. Really choose me." "It's not that simple, Hailey." "For me it is." That night, she packed her bags. She didn't scream, didn't make a scene. She just hugged him, one last time, and left. Richard stood there, frozen, unsure how to stop her. For the first time in his life, he'd lost something he couldn't buy back. Alone on the ranch, he looked out at the empty field and realized the emptiness wasn't out there. It was inside him. The Super Bowl hit like a storm. The entire country stopped. The stakes were high. The Dallas Kings, for the first time in years, had made it to the final, as underdogs. But people weren't just talking about the game. Richard Caldwell's name was still floating in whispers, memes, and headlines. The scandal had cooled, but it hadn't vanished. And Hailey vanished. No public appearances, no statements. It was like she'd been swallowed by her own shame, until that moment. When the national anthem ended and the stadium screens lit up, presenting tonight's special honorary cheer section. The stands opened, and there she was, Hailey Monroe, wearing a vintage red jacket with the old Kings emblem and light blue jeans. Hair loose, a quiet smile. Not the cheerleader she once was, a woman who had walked through fire and came back. The stadium froze. Then came scattered claps. And finally, a roar. Richard, watching from the skybox, went still. He didn't know. No one did. The team's board had extended the invitation quietly, hoping for some nostalgic PR boost. But this wasn't strategy. This was fate. When their eyes met, even from across the field, something broken snapped back into place. And everyone saw it. Hailey didn't flash a big smile, but her eyes said everything. And for the first time, Richard didn't hide what he felt. He left the box mid-game, took the stairs, ignored advisors, security, cameras. He crossed the field, in front of millions. And when he reached her, he simply said, "It doesn't matter who's watching. I'm here, for you." Hailey didn't answer with words. She just kissed him. This time, it wasn't stolen. It was given, chosen, and deserved. And the entire stadium erupted, as if the real touchdown had just happened. The whole world saw that kiss. But what no one saw was what came after. That night, the Dallas Kings won the Super Bowl. But no one remembered the score. The headlines the next day weren't about the game. They were about love, about courage, about a man who stepped away from power to hold the hand of the woman everyone had judged. Hailey didn't go back to teaching. She didn't chase fame either. She disappeared for a while, lived a few months in Santa Fe, wrote a book no one knew she was writing. The title? The Part No One Sees. Richard took a leave of absence. For the first time in his life, he turned off his phone for an entire week, learned to walk barefoot again, to cook eggs, to listen without trying to fix everything. They didn't post photos, didn't give interviews, they didn't need to. The love between them didn't want applause, just peace. And with time, the world went quiet. The media found a new scandal. The memes disappeared. And that silence, the one that once hurt, became a safe place. A few years later, during a charity game at the stadium, she showed up in the stands again. Not as a guest, just as a fan. Hair pulled back in a messy bun, a simple t-shirt, a soft smile. And beside her was him, wearing jeans, a cap turned backwards, laughing with her like life had finally understood what really mattered. The game played on down on the field, but the real hearts were at peace. Because not every happy ending needs fireworks, contracts, or headlines. Sometimes it just needs two people who chose not to give up on each other, even when the whole world wanted them to.